Everybody, just had a quick story I wanted to share. So the last couple weeks my truck has been acting up. I drive a Chevy Silverado 2500 2002. So it's an older truck. It has little issues here and there, mostly small problems that I can fix on my own. But I depend on this truck to get to work every day. I pull a trailer. It has all my tools in it for work. So I depend on this truck to make money. So a few weeks ago, I started noticing an issue. I didn't have as much power as I normally do, especially going up hills or accelerating. I could just tell that the engine was kind of lagging. I had no idea what was wrong with it. Felt like the transmission was acting up. That was just what it seemed like it was to me, but I wasn't sure, so I kept an eye on it for almost 2 weeks. And the problem kept getting worse. It didn't seem to be shifting when it should have been shifting, and as a result, I was not getting the power that I needed to get up hills and to accelerate, or even to drive faster than 55 miles per hour. So I was pretty worried about it. I finally took it into a mechanic, thinking, mechanics can be able to tell me for sure if it's a transmission or if it's something else. I told him the issue that I've been dealing with, and the mechanic takes a truck for a drive for a few minutes. He comes back and says, yeah, it feels like your transmission's slipping. It's probably a transmission issue, and he said that he didn't know enough to diagnose it any further than that because he's not a transmission guy. So he referred me to a transmission specialist here in Wilmington, and so I went to the transmission specialist a day or two later and let that guy drive the truck. He said, yeah, for sure it's your transmission. And you're going to have it rebuilt completely. We've seen this before, and that's what you'll have to do. Basically, it was going to cost me about $3,500 to have the transmission completely redone. That's a big chunk of change, especially when you're a 22-year-old kid. I'm not wealthy by any means. I'm still kind of getting started here with life. So $3,500, that's a lot of money for me to be paying for a repair on my truck. I was ready to take the advice of these mechanics and have my transmission redone. Then my uncle said, hey, before you take that truck in, let's try a couple more things just to make sure that it's the transmission before you go spend all that money. And I thought, okay, I'm pretty sure it's the transmission because 2 mechanics already told me it's the transmission, and they know more than either one of us do. But I was like, oh, we'll give it a shot. So I took the truck over to my uncle's house. We got underneath it. We dropped the pan, flushed the transmission fluid, changed the filters, changed the oil. And while we were under the truck, flushing the transmission fluid, we could see that the transmission fluid was really clean. And normally a bad transmission will not have clean fluid. So I started to think, okay, maybe it's not the transmission. I talked to a couple friends to see if they knew what they thought it was, and finally one friend suggested to me, hey, maybe it's your fuel filter. Some people have had this issue and just changed their fuel filter, and it turned out fine. And I thought, well, my fuel filter is overdue for a change. I hadn't thought of that before. So I bought a fuel filter. It's like $30 over at O'Reilly's Auto Parts. And I put it in, I'll show you. So you can see, so I've got my hood up, and over here, I'm not sure if you can see that or not, that white cylinder down there is the fuel filter. So I can reach it from right here, super easy to take out and replace. It cost me $30 and about 20 minutes of labor on my own, and I had a new fuel filter in. Took the truck for a drive, and it ran perfectly. Full power like normal, no lagging, no issue shifting, just ran perfectly. And I thought, man, the fuel filter was the problem. The whole time, the fuel filter was the problem. And I was this close to spending $3,500 on a new transmission that would not have solved the problem. I would have got the truck back and driven down the road with my trailer and had the exact same issue I had before $3,500 later. It wouldn't have fixed a thing if I had followed the advice of 2 mechanics. 2 mechanics. Instead, it was just $30 worth of parts and $20 worth of labor on my part, and problem solved. Anyway, I tell this whole long story because I wanted to share the lesson that I learned from this. Both of those mechanics still know more about fixing vehicles than I do, but they didn't know what was wrong with my truck, and I was able to figure that out on my own. So what did I learn from that? Well, you've got to take responsibility for everything in your own life. I should not rely on someone else to think for me or to solve my problems for me, because I mean, they might be an expert in the field of whatever, mechanics in this case. That doesn't mean that they know what my issue is or how to fix it. And I think this is kind of a major problem just across the board in our society. I don't think we think for ourselves like we should. We see problems in our personal lives or in our nation as a whole or in our communities, and we like to ask somebody else to fix them for us and to think for us and to come up with a solution for us. The first example that comes to my mind is my whole generation has been taught that if you don't go to college and get a degree, then you're never going to amount to anything. You're never going to make money, you're going to be poor your whole life, and you won't be able to have a stable income if you don't go to college. That's what we were told by, you know, parents, teachers, grandparents, people that cared about us. I really believe that these people that were telling us this my whole life, I believe that these people cared about me. I know that they did, actually. But did they know what was best for me and for my life? No, they didn't. And if I had followed their advice just because I believe that they knew more about life than me, which they do, then I would have ended up doing something that wasn't right for me. And I think that has been a trap that millions of my generation has fallen into, believing that we have to do this specific thing in order to be successful because somebody told us that. And so rather than looking into it for ourselves, we just do it because somebody else said we need to. And the result in many cases has been kids graduating from college with a bachelor's degree and a whole lot of student debt and never ever getting a job in their field of study. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. But it was the advice that somebody gave us, so we followed it. We've all been adhering to the social distancing thing. Why? Because the WHO and the CDC have told us that that's going to help solve the problem. And how many of us actually did some research to find out if it's actually going to help? Very few. Very few. If you did do some research like that, I'd love to hear about it. I really would. But most of us just said, okay, you know, they're the experts, so we're going to believe what they said, and we're going to make all these sacrifices just because they said to do it. And we're going to trust them like that. Crazy. Just crazy. The basic idea is, if you go to the mechanic, if you go to your school counselor, if you go to the doctor, if you go to anyone and they recommend something to you, then listen to their advice, even your parents, and say, okay, thank you for your input, I appreciate it, I'm gonna go home and think about it and do some of my own research and make my own decision based on what you've told me as well as information I can get from other sources. I'm gonna think about it for myself, and then I'm gonna make an informed decision that's best for me, best for my family. And I truly believe that every individual that does this will be much better off. You won't end up, you know, wasting $3,500 on a transmission when all you needed was a fuel filter. Because in the end, if I had chosen to have my transmission redone when it didn't need to be redone, that's on me, right? I can't blame the mechanics for that. I can't blame my buddies that I talked to for that, because I made the final decision. It's my truck, my responsibility, and I made the choice to swap the tranny. It's on me, and it's the same thing with you. It's on you. If you go to college and get lots of debt and don't get a job because you didn't study it out, that's on you. If you go to the doctor and take his advice without doing any of your own research or any of your own thinking and end up with issues because of some prescription he gave you, that's on you, ultimately. Because it's your responsibility to find out what's right for you and your life. It's nobody else's job. So anyway, that's what I learned from this little experience this past week. Ultimately, it's up to you to take care of yourself in every aspect of life. Don't ever outsource your thinking to someone else.